Now, you may recall 2 nights ago when Esme Murphy brought us the heart-wrenching story of a 9-year-old Homestead, Florida boy who was in tears over being hungry and scared. Esme told us the only time that he smiled was when she mentioned she was from Minnesota. Juan, you see, is a big fan of the Minnesota Twins, especially Kirby Puckett, of course Kirby. So we sent a care package of sorts to Florida, and today Esme and photojournalist Dave Cheney delivered it to Juan. Several bags full of Twins memorabilia, including a Twins jersey, some baseball cards, and of course, who could forget the world-famous Homer hanky.
You know what that is? It's a Homer hanky. Did you see theirs in the World Series? What's that?
Kirby Puckett.
That's his signature.
So what do you think?
The poster.
That's pretty nice. God, it's getting wet. It's raining here again.
Take your photo just real quick.
We are told it was all a big hit. Esme joins us now live from Homestead. Now, Esme, you have shown us over the past few days a lot of destruction, a great deal, in fact. Now, is the relief starting to make a difference down there?
Well, it really has, Colleen. This is truly a tragedy of epic proportions, a tragedy made up of hundreds of thousands of individual stories of loss, pain, suffering, and continued hardship, hardship that will last months and even years. Tonight, the 10th day after Andrew struck, 320,000 people in this area are still without power, and 250,000 people, that's almost the population of St. Paul, remains homeless, their homes gone. Now, the lucky ones are staying with friends and family, but tens of thousands of others will be staying in temporary shelters or tent cities probably well through Christmas. As photographer Dave Cheney and I found out, this is a crisis that shows no sign of ending.
10 days later, Andrew's fire still burns. The stench of garbage burning at least provides welcome light for the homeless. For the first week after Andrew, 750,000 people were without power and with little help.
We've been sleeping outside, and there are a lot of mosquitoes. The babies are being sick.
We need to get us out of here. We need to get out. That's a whole nother week they want us to stand in line.
But darkness is almost a blessing. Daylight illuminates the horror.
I work in Homestead, and I know what I see. They drive in the war zone. The people I know are hurting.
It is difficult to describe the devastation, impossible to really capture the suffering of 250,000 people now homeless. Everything is destroyed. A reporter who saw Baghdad after the U.S. bombing in the Gulf War says this is much worse. This woman survived World War II. She says Andrew has been more devastating than the Nazi invasion of her homeland of Czechoslovakia.
It was much worse than the war, because the war, the bombing lasted just for 15 minutes and then it was over. And this thing was going forever and ever.
South Florida is now a third world country created by Andrew's invasion and rescued by another blitz from the U.S. military. The soldiers are building tent cities that will house 43,000 people. The soldiers, M16s in hand, are guarding the endless lines that are everywhere. Lines for food, lines for welfare checks, and this one to collect the mail.
Yes. Miami Beach. He's going to Miami Beach.
The soldiers, in whatever language it takes, are doing whatever it takes to enforce order and a rigid military curfew.
3-4, 8-4, 9er.
Soldiers are still soldiers, but for the devastated families and the children, they are welcome protectors. But for all the military's effort, it is not enough. Outside the city of Homestead are cities like Perrine, population 16,000, where relief supplies have only begun to be delivered. 2 days ago, 9-year-old Juan Perez cried as he told us he was hungry.
How are you getting through this?
I'm listening to my mom, to my dad, to my family.
Are you hungry?
Yes.
Juan was clearly overwhelmed. As brutal as the physical damage in South Florida, volunteer psychologists are already finding a plague of post-traumatic stress disorder, both among victims and some of the other volunteers.
I have a lot of volunteers that are not used to these kinds of situations. They're here to do a very effective job, but it gets hard on them too. And so we're here to try and defuse some of the stress.
Emergency medical doctors here are worried about a second storm, one of devastating epidemics. Piles of garbage are already leading to an infestation of disease-carrying rats. The rats will likely be followed by snakes. Diseases like cholera and typhoid are also fueled by the lack of restroom facilities for the 250,000 homeless. Even those who are crammed into the shelters are going to the bathroom on the street.
A lot of people been using the bathroom outside, which ain't, too sanitary, but you have to do what you have to do.
Signs asking for help from insurance companies are everywhere. Signs of a vigilante spirit are growing too.
Looters will be shot. We don't have a whole lot, but I worked hard to get what we got.
Amidst criticism that his response to the crisis was too slow, President Bush arrived here yesterday for the second time in a week.
We, working cooperatively with everybody, will rebuild South Florida. The spirit's still here.
But as the president's motorcade left, despair remained. Bill Clinton will be here on Thursday. But the people here are now wondering what will happen when the politicians and all the cameras leave.
And you try and be positive, but you getting this feeling that everything is just for naught. I'm glad I'm alive. I am. I'm glad my kids are alive, but where do we go from here? We gotta live and suffer like this? This is crazy.
What several victims have told us is their biggest fear now is that when all the publicity dies down, they will be forgotten. But Colleen, for the hundreds of thousands of people who were scarred by Andrew, they will never forget, for they will be living with the pain for some years to come.
I can imagine. Thank you, Esme.